Good afternoon. I'm Aimee Beckman-Collier, a member of the St. Catherine of Siena Dialogue Series Planning Committee. And on behalf of the committee and St. Catherine of Siena Church and Student Center, I welcome you to this keynote address, which is the second event in our inaugural dialogue series. The St. Catherine of Siena Dialogue Series is not merely a speaker or lecture series. Instead, it's a series within a series. That is, it's not just an attempt to bring to Des Moines a nationally recognized speaker on an important topic, which we are clearly doing today. Instead, it offers multiple opportunities for people to engage with an important topic. Our goal is to provide opportunities to listen, converse, and then act for the common good. On February 2nd, more than 200 people gathered for our first event, which focused on the state of immigration in Iowa. The panel discussion featured a number of experts on immigration law and directors of programs that serve immigrants and refugees. The first of three events provided information about the history of immigration, pathways to legal status, the refugee vetting process, and the current situation for immigrants and the organizations that serve them. Today's keynote, Broken at the Border, given by Bishop Seitz of the Diocese of El Paso, Texas, will allow us to widen our perspective and to consider our response so that we can take action for the common good. This afternoon, we are privileged to hear from Bishop Seitz, one who walks among immigrants, converses with border agents, and speaks prophetically with elected leaders in his city, his diocese, the state of Texas, and throughout our nation on the very complex topic of immigration. But of course, immigration isn't just a topic for huge numbers of our brothers and sisters in this community and throughout the United States. It's a lived experience, and one that you obviously want to know more about. We invite you to deepen your understanding of the human face of immigration and to act for the common good by joining us for the third event in our series within a series, which will take place on Saturday, March 29th. We call it an action workshop, and we have designed it so that individuals, as well as representatives of communities and organizations, can learn about the practical needs of agencies serving immigrants and refugees in the Des Moines area, and to consider making a commitment to meet some of those needs. Given the recent actions of the new administration, those organizations' needs have grown exponentially. All of us can help, and we invite you to do so. Please consult your program for more information about the Action Workshop. We hope you'll RSVP to our invitation to join us on March 29th to turn the listening and conversation of the first two events of the dialogue series into action. A few other details. This event is being recorded and will be available next week on the St. Catherine of Siena website. Check your program for that website address and for a listing of the growing number of resources we are offering on our website, including a recording of the February 2nd panel discussion. After Bishop Seitz's keynote, we'll have a Q&A followed by a reception in Levitt Hall. We invite you to be in conversation with others while enjoying refreshments. We hope you'll take time to linger and to be in solidarity with others who are eager to listen, converse, and act for the common good. As noted in the program, you'll also be able to view an artistic response to immigration. 10 paintings by Des Moines artist Pat Millen are on display at the reception. We are grateful to Bishop Seitz for traveling to Des Moines this weekend, and we express our appreciation to the sponsors of the St. Catherine Dialogue Series and to all of you for caring enough to try to understand the very human dimensions of immigration when you could be enjoying the sunny weather or the Drake men's basketball game. Now I'd like to introduce Bishop William Joensen, whose personal invitation to Bishop Seitz was instrumental in creating a vision for this first dialogue series. Bishop Joensen, who became the 10th Bishop of Des Moines in 2019, is an Ames native, and he earned his undergraduate degree at Iowa State University. He attended medical school at the University of Iowa for 2 years before beginning seminary studies, and he was ordained a priest for the Archdiocese of Dubuque in 1989. He received a doctorate in philosophy from the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. in 2001. As a priest of the Archdiocese of Dubuque, he served in parishes, as spiritual director at St. Pius X Seminary in Dubuque, and in a variety of roles at Luther College. I'm sorry. That's not true, and now you won't trust me anymore, will you? It's another L. A variety of roles at Loras College, go Doohawks, where he taught philosophy at Loras College for 18 years. That's Loras College. He is the chair of the Higher Education Working Group for the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. Please welcome Bishop William Joensen.
Well, all of us at Loras during the time, even though our choirs aspired to excellence, we knew that Luther set the bar very high when it came to choral and performing arts, so no offense taken in any way. It's a great privilege and grace to welcome Brother Bishop Mark Seitz to the Diocese of Des Moines, the city of Des Moines, and the community that gathers today. Ordained a priest for the Diocese of Dallas in 1980. He served in a variety of roles with backgrounds in training in theology, liturgical studies, further studies in spirituality and bioethics, something after my own heart as well. He too served as a parish priest and pastor, seminary faculty member and adjunct professor at the University of Dallas, and then ordained an auxiliary bishop and served as vicar general for Dallas. Pope Francis called him to the episcopacy for the Diocese of El Paso in 2013, not long after Pope Francis himself was elected. And much your episcopacy and his papacy are contemporaneous. In 2022, Pope Francis singled you out, Bishop Seitz, in an interview in America magazine. He probably didn't want me to bring this up. But he said, "Permit me to mention a bishop about whom I do not know if he is conservative or if he's progressive, if he is of the right or of the left, but he is a good pastor. Seitz on the border with Mexico. He is a man who grasps all the contradictions of that place and carries them forward as a pastor. I do not say the others are not good, but this is the one I know." Also commending you for being the first bishop to publicly kneel in protest of the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. You serve presently as the chair of the Committee on Migration for the United States Bishops. You've also served that body in divine worship, pro-life activities, Hispanic affairs in the church in Latin America, in addition to your work with Catholic Legal Immigration Network, Courage, and moderator of the National Pastoral Musicians. And as some of us experienced at liturgy today, or at last night's Catholic Charities, Shamrocks and Shenanigans, he has a marvelous Irish tenor voice, which he put on display. In your pastoral letter, Sorrow and Mourning Flee Away, pastoral letter on migration to the people of God in the Diocese of El Paso, you encourage not to repeat the errors of the past, but to educate new generations not to turn their back on our neighbors and everything around us, citing Pope Francis's address to the U.S. Congress in 2015, nor to build a utopia in this broken world of ours, but to serve a God of abundance who provides for the needs of those who serve him with charity and generosity. Many will describe you as prophetic, but you yourself have identified the migrants themselves as the prophetic people who in their lived testimony to values increasingly sidelined in today's culture of faith, life, and family speak to us and wake us from our own indifference. Some you acknowledge may question whether in your reflections you are not substituting politics for the teaching of the church. You would answer that as a pastor, my duty is to the gospel of Christ. And so you want to continue to call all your people and to lead not just your own particular flock, but all to claim, as Pope Paul VI said, to become artisans of their own destiny. And as you talk about in your message in the wake of the massacre of 22 Latinos in August 2019, another pastoral letter, Night Will Be No More, pastoral letter to the people of God, you encourage the Catholic community in El Paso to be on permanent mission and ongoing conversion to the Lord so that you might be salt and leaven in the work of justice in the borderlands. Charity and justice must be the work of each of our parishes, flowing from the Word of God, our baptismal commitment, and our communion at the Eucharistic table. Your prayer for the Church of El Paso is my prayer, not only for St. Catherine of Siena Parish, for the Diocese of Des Moines, but for the Des Moines community, our state, and our country as well. It's a privilege to welcome you, Bishop Mark Seitz.
Thank you. It's really a privilege, a pleasure to be here with you today. Hearing that introduction, I'm thinking maybe I should just stop there. In the first reading from that we Catholics are hearing in Mass today, we're reminded that when a person opens their mouth, their defects are revealed. And so maybe I really should say, well, it's been nice being with you. I am honored to be here at Drake University, and I'm very grateful for the invitation. And not just because it meant I could get a little closer to the land of my birth in Wisconsin for a few days. Let me also express my gratitude to Bishop Joensen and all the bishops, really, of Iowa, who have been so clear, spoken with a united voice on this important issue. In Texas and across the country, we've been moved by your witness here in Iowa. And I want to thank you in my name and in the name of the Migration and Refugee Services Committee of the U.S. Bishops. I also want to begin by acknowledging the challenging health situation of Pope Francis. I think one of the things that we can do to show our closeness and gratitude to Pope Francis is by having this conversation on a topic dear to his heart. He's made it a prime issue of his papacy. I pray that the Lord might lessen his suffering and restore him to health, and I invite your prayers as well. When I was asked several months ago to deliver this talk, I was asked by the organizers to speak about the brokenness of the U.S.-Mexico border. I can report to you that it's still broken. But don't mistake what I'm saying. The border itself isn't broken, not the border. The border is home to many wonderful border communities, many of them binational communities, which straddle both sides of the border, like my home in El Paso, Texas. These are places where people cross the border every day. College students, faculty, workers, family, priests, just as we have done for hundreds of years. It may be unique and particular, but there are many ways that the border really does work. Our border communities are vibrant and beautiful places and often very safe, like El Paso. And if you haven't visited, I encourage you to do so. On the border, we value cross-border relationships and activities. I just came from a meeting of our border bishops from both sides of the Texas-Mexico border, which is a group that has been meeting for decades because there are nuances and particularities to border life, common practices and ways of doing things, All of that is really a beautiful culture unto itself. We call ourselves, by the way, the Tex-Mex bishops. Americans and Mexicans are neighbors at the border. And at the border, we recognize that our present and future are interconnected. And all that blending makes the food better as well. And so we bishops on the border look at the life of the church on the border as one common reality, and sharing our different perspectives helps us to coordinate and learn from one another and grow together and to write a common story. It makes us better citizens of our respective countries. It helps us to grow as leaders in the church on both sides of the border. And by sharing, we also grow in the life of faith. And it helps us to work to weave a common story, a common future. So, my friends, the border is not broken, but our immigration system is. And what I'd like to speak to you about today is not really about the border. We have our challenges, no doubt, including, of course, the issue of how we manage immigration. But the issue of immigration is broader than the border. And the brokenness around the issues at the border is just a symptom of a broader brokenness in our culture, our politics, and our law. Now, when we look around today at the state of our country, it is clear that we are living in challenging times. There are many challenges we are facing as a country and a world community. In our country, many people still lack decent work, affordable housing, affordable health care, and affordable tuition. These economic factors discourage young people from pursuing lifelong commitments and put incredible pressure on working families. Around the world, there is the sense that we are only a few steps away from sliding into chaos, into what the Holy Father has called a third world war fought piecemeal in different parts of the globe. And both at home and abroad, we are losing the sense that politics is a noble pursuit, and we risk descending into a dangerous cynicism about our common life. We are at risk of losing a common story. We lack a common story, I think, because we are no longer good storytellers. Our storytelling ability is being weakened by many things, not just by screen time and ChatGPT and artificial intelligence, but by the belief that the only thing that matters is what can be measured, commodified, and priced, bought and sold. This is like acid wash on the things that keep us together, family, community, and our ability to be neighbors to one another. And in a university setting, I need to mention that the sources of storytelling are being lost even in the academy. Science is important. STEM is important. It tells us the what, but it doesn't tell us the why or the how. It gives us important pieces, but it can't give us all the pieces we need in order to write a common story. In higher education, philosophy, religion, theology, history, the humanities, and the liberal arts, all are being lost to the logic of profit. We lie to ourselves if we think that the market alone can determine what are the most important elements of a good education. This would be a world without This would be a world without poetry. We require deeper wells of wisdom. Education should always be about the full truth, veritas, like the motto of this university. We do a disservice to our students if we are graduating them into a world without coordinates, without so much as a compass. When we can no longer tell a common story, capable of building a common future, as the South Korean philosopher Byung-Chul Han has pointed out, populist, nationalist, and right-wing extremist or tribal narratives, including conspiracy theories, cater to this need. I appreciate that at Drake right now, right from its foundation really, it aimed to maintain a well-rounded unity of studies, open to the transcendent, the humanities and the sciences. And right from the beginning, you also welcome students from around the world, as far away as Asia and the Middle East, precisely in order to weave a common future. I think those two things are related. Now let me try to relate this to what we're seeing in our country on the issue of immigration. We are only a couple of weeks into the new American administration, but in that time, we've seen a number of disturbing actions. The near total closure of the border to the vulnerable, backed by the force of the U.S. military. The suspension of critical programs for international refugees. The ending of several critical legal channels for migration in the region and actions to terminate legal status for those who have it, including temporary protected status, or TPS. An attack on the rights to citizenship guaranteed by the 14th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. Calumny against organizations providing humanitarian response to the U.S.-Mexico border. Highly publicized workplace and neighborhood enforcement actions which have seeded fear in communities throughout the country. A reversal of a policy restraining non-essential immigration enforcement actions in hospitals, community centers, schools, and churches. The forcing of concessions from our neighboring countries, Mexico and Canada, to further militarize their borders through economic threat. The suspension of important humanitarian aid to countries in the region meant to mitigate the need to migrate. The establishment of an immigration detention center at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, a place long associated with a permanent state of exception and human rights violations, and the troubling use of the language of criminality to describe migrants in our country with irregular status, or those deliberately being deprived of this administration of their immigration status. There certainly were antecedents to many of these actions during the first Trump administration, And at the U.S.-Mexico border, there are deep-rooted historical patterns of injustice which exceed any one administration, and we have seen many of the same dynamics at play at different times. Over time, the exception has become the norm, and emergency responses have taken on permanent features. But in this particular case, the speed with which these actions are being carried out, the dystopian rhetoric and sharp attitude, the unapologetic belligerence towards neighboring states in the region, the elevation of self-interest as the criterion of legitimacy, and the disregard for the rule of law and due process are without precedent. The dysfunctional approach to immigration is driven by the deeper crisis of public and social life. These actions have provoked a very difficult pastoral situation for our people across the country. There are approximately 11 million persons in the United States affected by the reality of living without documents. 22 million persons across the country live with someone who is undocumented. 4.4 million U.S. citizen children live with a parent who is undocumented. More than half of this population has lived in the country for more than a decade, and many of them for more than 20 years. I don't have to mention how important immigrants are to our health and economic resilience as a country, disproportionately occupying essential jobs in critical fields of agriculture, healthcare, elder care, construction, and hospitality. For these reasons, if the president's campaign of mass deportations should come to pass, it would undoubtedly be an economic catastrophe, a social and family catastrophe, and, more importantly, a moral catastrophe. The turning away of the refugee, the closure of the border to the vulnerable, and plans for a campaign of indiscriminate deportation are fundamentally incompatible with the moral law and certainly incompatible with the gospel. I would like to consider with you a moment the role of the church in all of this. The Catholic Church in the United States has always been an immigrant church. Whether it was the Spanish who settled the Southwest, the Germans who immigrated to Iowa to tend to the fields, or the recent arrivals from Mexico and Central America, many of these persons came to this country bringing their Catholic faith. And so, for these historical reasons, the Catholic Church in this country is particularly sensitive to the immigration question. Many of our institutions, our primary and secondary schools, our hospitals, our universities, and social service organizations were built to tend to the needs of these immigrant communities. And we have also partnered with the federal government, with administrations of both parties, on resettling those affected by conflict and persecution throughout the world. And I think we can be proud of the role of these institutions in fostering the integration of new generations of Americans into our national story. But there is a deeper reason for which we are sensitive to this question. The actions of this administration, and truth be told, administrations of both parties before it, particularly the issue of deportations, the family separation that obtains from deportation, as well as the issue of the denial of entry to asylum seekers and refugees, represent a deliberate attempt to write certain categories of people out of the national story. Now, this is fundamentally un-American. It is inconsistent. It is inconsistent with our history and as a country of immigrants. It is inconsistent with the contributions we know migrants make to our society. It is inconsistent with our history of engagement with many of the sending countries in the region, particularly Central America, Haiti, and Mexico. It is also inconsistent with the lessons the world community should have learned in the wake of the Second World War, when we experienced an appropriate national sense of guilt for having turned Jewish refugees away away to face certain danger and death in concentration camps. That was the origin, by the way, of our asylum system. Now, it is true, it is urgent that we reform our immigration structures in such a way that brings order to the chaos and ensures our security. The Catholic Church has long supported these sensible measures, but we can also do so in such a way that we also meet basic humanitarian needs and respect the contribution of new Americans made to our society. These goals are only in tension with one another politically. And to overcome that tension, we will need a new moral force. Our Catholic parish communities are close to the pain of these actions because persons without documents and mixed families are in our parishes. We recognize that they are in our neighborhoods and in our communities. We know that when we talk about immigrants, we are not talking about them. We're talking about us. Documents or no documents, they are an important part of us. And so there must be a response. As St. Paul says to the Corinthians, if one suffers, all suffer. We're part of the same body. There is a role for everyone in addressing the situation migrants in this country are facing today. And we need to learn new ways to collaborate. We need to ensure that our migrant community understands their rights and the legal options available to them, and that we do what we can to equip them to prepare and protect their families, their homes, and their businesses. We need to assist those families who are affected by deportation. We also need to work on a local level as educational institutions, elected leaders, civic leaders, and religious leaders to ensure open channels of communication and dialogue in order to reduce the anxiety and to build and to begin rebuilding from the bottom up a more welcoming culture. This is the work we have been engaged in my own diocese. We are working very hard to provide Know Your Rights sessions in our parishes and Catholic schools, and also to local community groups and organizations that have requested information and support. We are also meeting intensely with our local elected leadership in order to ensure that we do not lose the narrative on community security. Immigrants are not criminals. Ensuring community means ensuring sensible policies on limiting local cooperation with immigration enforcement. We cannot have situations where vulnerable people are fearful of peace officers in our community because they are afraid they or a loved one will be deported. That makes everyone less safe. We need to work very hard in this area to reweave some sensible practices from below by working with elected leaders as well as law enforcement leaders, who I have found are generally very sensitive to this position. And we are also making sure that we are doing our part to meet the needs of those now trapped in Mexico through our Border Refugee Assistance Fund, to which I invite you to donate. We are providing support for shelter, medical care, and psychological assistance to vulnerable migrants in Ciudad Juarez, the need for which will now only increase with the effective suspension of asylum and the surge in deportation and removals. We also need to speak out. This is the burden of leadership that our educational institutions and churches must also assume as well. On a deep level, Americans know that immigration is part of our national story, and I really believe that by working against the grain of the isolation and atomization crippling our national life, by building community on a local level, we can plant the seeds for a renewal of our civic and public culture. I believe that. Recently, I traveled to one of the more rural areas in my diocese, where people tend to be more conservative-leaning. I was celebrating Mass in a parish, and the community asked if there could be if I would permit a speaker at the end of Mass. It turned out that the person they wanted permission to speak was a Colombian migrant. His name was, interestingly enough, Jesus. In this, our new context, Jesus, had already made the decision that he was going to self-deport and return to Colombia. He was a young man, I'd say mid-20s. He had arrived there 2 or 3 years ago and had come to be loved and embraced by the community. And he wanted to thank different members of that parish community. There were also several others that happened to arrive around the same time from Colombia, but he was the one that was left. And so he came up at the end of Mass, and he began expressing his gratitude to the community by reciting, consciously or unconsciously, lines from the Bible. Matthew 25. I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. Homeless, and you took me in. There were tears all around. The parish community because of the rhetoric and actions of this community, of this administration, was losing one of their neighbors. The community is impoverished by that loss. What is really under threat now is our ability to be neighbors to one another. That is what racism, xenophobia, and inflammatory and anti-immigrant rhetoric does. It erodes our ability to be neighbors to one another. I think what can unite us as academic, civic, or church leaders is the important work of rebuilding community and human fraternity amid so much cultural, economic, and political wasteland. Christians and all people of goodwill in this moment need to be artisans and bridge builders of a renewed and reconciled humanity. The Vice President recently said that the Ordo Amoris, the traditional Christian conception of the obligation to love one's neighbor, means that we have a special responsibility to take care of our family, our community, and our country first. Now, he was attacked for that, but there is some truth there. We do have a special responsibility for our family and our neighbors, and love for country is noble. If that's what the Vice President meant, so far so good. What is missing, though, is the story of the Good Samaritan. Imagine you're familiar with the parable. Jesus tells the story in response to the question of a lawyer. Now, with all due respect to your law school here, always be cautious about questions from lawyers. The lawyer asks Jesus about the ancient Jewish injunction to love God and neighbor, which is the core of Jewish mysticism, spirituality, and law. The lawyer is interested in making distinctions and defining limits and borders, who is in and who is out. That's what lawyers do. Jesus responds with the story of the Good Samaritan, who finds a man beaten on the side of the road and cares for his needs only after a priest and a Levite have passed by. Those who one would expect to help pass by. But the Samaritan doesn't. He stops, he notices, he binds up wounds. Now, what you have to understand is that the Samaritans were of a different social circle altogether. The Jews and the Samaritans had no truck with one another. There was no dialogue. There were ancient rivalries. They were on different sides of the tracks. In fact, a Jew would have felt revulsion if a Samaritan had tried to help him or her, and may have preferred to have been left alone. To put it in contemporary terms, it is as if the democratic socialist were laying injured at the side of the road, and someone with a MAGA hat came by, and only that person stopped. And why does he stop? The biblical story makes clear that the priest and the Levite, the beaten Jewish man's co-nationals, didn't stop because they didn't see and they didn't notice. They didn't allow themselves to be moved. They were driven by the logic of self-interest and calculation. Stopping didn't figure into their algorithms of efficiency. And they could attempt to excuse their failure based upon the need to fulfill their religious obligations. But the Samaritan, the biblical text notes, was moved and in his guts. The Greek text literally says his guts churned. He allowed himself to be fully engaged, to see reality in its fullness, to be moved and thereby to be implicated. This is what education ought to do. An immersion experience in reality, and opening up to reality, which is really a moral choice to be engaged or not. This is why algorithms alone only get us so far. With the parable of the Good Samaritan, Jesus clearly intends to show us that everyone is potentially my neighbor, especially the person I might least think is my neighbor. But there's something deeper. The takeaway from this parable is not meant to be simply a universal ethic of being nice to everyone, as if the gospel could be reduced to polite moral commonplace. As Jesus says in the gospel, even the pagans can do that. It's not meant to be bourgeois ethics that would ultimately be an escapism. As Dostoevsky wrote, it has always happened that the more I hate people individually, the more ardent I become in my love for humanity as a whole. Or as I believe it was that canine philosopher, Snoopy, who put it, humanity I love, it's people I can't stand. And again, if that's the problem the vice president was getting at, again, so far so good. The point of the parable is that that guy that you meet on the road, that smelly, bruised, battered, inconvenient person right in front of you that no one else is paying attention to, that person concretely, that person is your neighbor. Here, love becomes concrete. This immigrant family that crossed the border, they are your neighbors. They are your flesh, as the Hebrew Scriptures put it. And when you open yourself up to that person, when I am engaged with reality, when I touch wounds, when you realize that that person is your flesh and your neighbor, then everything changes. You open yourself up to something transcendent. You open yourself up to the truth, veritas. You open yourself up to a force capable of weaving deeper ties in humanity. This is a divine force. In this sense, family, tribe, and nation are important. We might also say one's own political tribe. But Jesus teaches us that all of these can become idols and political slogans. The kingdom that Jesus has in mind, the deeper reality he points to, is built up one encounter at a time, patiently, concretely, spontaneously, one relationship at a time, always with one more person at the table. This is the real person the church is interested in, migration. Because this is not fundamentally a political issue. It is an issue of the person right in front of me, the person whom love has brought into my consciousness. And frankly, that is destabilizing to a political order based solely on self-interest and the idolatry of security and control. If there is a clash between the church and the political order on the question of migration, the crux of the disagreement is here. What is more generative of social peace and more foundational to a healthy society, the endless quest to control at the cost of all spontaneity and novelty, and the relentless pursuit of individual and naked national interest, or the human fraternity and the risk of love? We bet on love. We bet on love. The church bets on love every time, even if that puts us in the crosshairs. And I can tell you I felt that way from time to time. This is what the vice president got wrong about the Ordo Amoris. We don't always get to choose our neighbor. God puts that person in front of us. Love puts that person in front of us. God meets us in that person. It's more than that. That person is become Jesus to me. The other is become the presence of the divine in my life. This is the real Ordo Amoris. And this is what makes us human. As Cicero put it, non nobis solum nati sumus. Not for ourselves alone are we born. Now, what can you do? I knew you'd ask me that. In the Catholic Church, we're about to enter into Lent, the period before Easter. For Lent, Pope Francis has asked all of us, as a Lenten practice, to think about our own lives in the light of the difficulties that people who migrate experience. We're all only a generation or a few generations away from the immigrant experience. Have you thought about that? How can I grow in empathy and compassion? How can I be less self-absorbed? How can I make sure I'm not just standing still, not moving, paralyzed by fear and hopelessness, or reluctant to move out of my comfort zone? How can I grow in love and patience? As an institution, what can Drake do to recommit to its identity? As an institution committed to working for human fraternity across borders, what can it do to pursue the truth, veritas, all the way down to the dregs? There are immigrant students and faculty here, too. How can we support them? How can we support students who are DACA, who are part of mixed families? How can we make sure this institution is making a difference in the lives of Iowans affected by this new reality? How do we make sure we are not walking by on the other side of the road? How are you helping Iowa and this country rewrite our common story? In Catholicism, we're accused of playing the guilt card to get our people to ask these questions. I have nothing against that. But I know I won't have to do that with this audience. I thank you again, and I look forward to your questions. God bless you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Woody, and I have the pleasure of moderating our question and answer session today. Bishop Seitz has generously agreed to take a few questions from the audience, so I'd ask you to be thinking about those. We'll send a microphone your way in just a minute. But before we begin the Q&A, I wanted to extend our sincere thanks to Bishop Seitz for his powerful and thought-provoking lecture. Bishop, your leadership on issues of immigration, human dignity, and justice is truly inspiring, and we saw that today. We deeply appreciate you sharing your insights with us today and helping us understand the challenges that are faced by migrants at our borders. So thank you again for coming here. Now, I want to ensure that we create a space for open, respectful, and meaningful dialogue this afternoon. So just a couple guidelines here. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and a microphone will be brought to you, so please wait for the microphone to get to you. To allow as many as people as possible to participate, I kindly ask that you keep your questions brief and to the point, and one question per person. And then the last thing, I don't think this is going to be a problem for this audience, but just a reminder, this is a dialogue. So let's approach this conversation with respect and a spirit of listening. So let's begin. Who would like to ask the first question? Aimee, we got a gentleman over here. Wait. We're going to start over here, sir.
I volunteered at the Annunciation House in 2019, and I hear now that the Attorney General has a suit against the Annunciation House, saying they're trafficking and smuggling. The ICE people were bringing us those people. So what is happening with the situation, the suit against Annunciation House? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your question. You know, some of the things, accusations we hear being made today, you kind of wonder if you're living in Animal Farm. The Attorney General of the state of Texas, for those who might not be aware, has attempted to send in a team of lawyers unannounced to an NGO known as Annunciation House that has worked there for more than 40 years, a Catholic organization, not part formally of the diocese, but we work extremely closely together. And what their role is, as you mentioned, is to receive immigrants who are without a home or passing through. And the ones that we've been formally receiving, the vast majority of them were people that were processed by the Border Patrol and ICE and then released to us. We work hand in hand with them, right? It's not a hiding operation in any stretch of the imagination, as you know. And, we played a key role in helping immigrants not to be trafficked. You can imagine what would have happened if they were left on the streets, right? But that's the accusation that the Attorney General made, and he made it clear after they said, well, we'd like to talk to our attorney first, and we'll see what we ought to give you and what is of a personal nature, because they had health records, things like that. And the Attorney General came back, I believe it was the next day, and said, well, we're just going to close you down because even though we don't have proof, we believe you're trafficking people. It was just horrible. And the courts in El Paso were very clear in saying that this was moved by political motives, and it's since been bumped up to the state Supreme Court. And they've heard arguments, and so we're waiting for a ruling. So.
On the grounds of the state capitol in Texas, there is a statue of the history of blacks in Texas. And one of the things that you learn very quickly is that slavery didn't really happen in Mexican Texas. It happened after people took over Texas. And the thing that ties us in Iowa to Texas in that way is that many of our places have memorialized battles that were there essentially to create slavery in Texas. Places like Cerro Gordo, Palo Alto, Buena Vista. There are a number of counties in Iowa that are named for generals from the Mexican-American War. So if we really haven't reconciled the issues of why Texas exists from the 19th century, how do we really get to even have the dialogue that we need to have? It's not just about immigration and immigrants, it's about the struggle of people that have been here for hundreds of years, and it's all tied together. It's not just immigration, it's all of that. So my question is, how do we reconcile that?
No, actually, I think your point is excellent, and it's so important that we know, that we learn our history, right? And there are many things that have happened throughout the history of our nation that we cannot be proud of, and we need to acknowledge those things and do whatever we can where it's possible to make amends for some things that I thought we had kind of moved beyond, frankly, but continue to raise their heads, and probably will, as you point out, until we know them.
I have just a real quick question. I'm a divergent thinker, so you gave us a lot of information in that speech and message. Is this going to be available? Your speech going to be available for those of us who need to have some time to absorb what you said, because you said so much?
Well, thank you for that question, and I do believe it was recorded, correct?
Yes, it'll be on the St. Catherine of Siena website in a couple days.
So you get to hear me more than once if you want.
supposed to stand?
That'd be great.
If the Iroquois and the Sioux had had better homeland security, we wouldn't be in this mess.
Darn right.
I'm not quite sure how to frame this. I understand there's a difference between what science has to offer and what faith has to offer. Mm-hmm. And I also understand that given the same set of facts, if I can use that word, you can create two very different stories. Mm-hmm. And so what I see happening is a vast creation of a story that's meant to intimidate, that's meant to make people fearful, that's meant to divide us, and that's meant to eventually lead to something that I would have thought 10 or 20 years ago was unthinkable in this country. So what I am trying to ask is, where does the church stand on taking a position of respect for facts as opposed to a bunch of fancy rhetoric and verbiage?
Yes, well, thank you. And I think you tie into a part of my talk that expressed the importance of really seeking out the common narrative, if you will, or the story that undergirds our life. And as that Korean-German philosopher pointed out, when there is a vacuum of an effect of a strong, true narrative, other narratives fill the gap, and so perhaps that's some of what we're seeing, and of course, Veritas is something that reveals itself in many different ways through the different sciences. And through the humanities. And I think we need to have a broad way of searching out that true narrative, knowing our history and so on. And perhaps, again, it's the forgetfulness of the importance of developing a narrative, of focusing on the numbers, if you will, rather than the why and the how, that is part of our problem right now.
Aimee, you've got a woman over there in the gray to your left. To your left, Aimee.
Which one are we going for?
What would you say to religious leaders and professors who don't want to or feel afraid to speak on this topic because they don't want to be political, even though the reality is that this has been made very political and has been affecting so many people?
Buckle up. It's time to speak. Yeah, no, I understand the fear, and it seems as though fear has been cultivated as a political tool in many respects. Fear of repercussions, and it has many politicians scared to death, to speak of their conscience today, and many others, including religious leaders. I think what has been so important to me, and I think it will be important for any, certainly religious leader, is that I've had to go back to the gospel, and I need to check everything I'm saying against the gospel and the teaching of the church, which has been so thoughtfully, carefully developed through 2,000 years. And that's what gives me the ability to speak with the confidence that I have no interest in being a political leader, but I have a tremendous passion to speak the truth of the gospel.
Aimee, there's somebody back there that has a question, and then down here, and then over there. We're going to make you run.
Somebody should have told me not to wear high heels today.
Maybe you answered the question before, but I'd like to be more specific. Did you, or do you continue to, encourage preachers of the word, priests and those who preach the word, to share the idea of immigration and how the church has progressed throughout the years? Do you encourage, as a bishop, what can you do? Do you do it now, specifically, to outline some things that we can say in the pulpit?
Thank you. Actually, we've been working very hard at this. It's very challenging to get a hearing for any group these days. We're so bombarded with different voices, and sometimes the voice of the bishops, frankly, is it doesn't reach to the grassroots very effectively. But one of my efforts as chair of the Migration Refugee Services has been to revitalize an organization that's with the Bishops' Conference known as Justice for Immigrants, JFI. And that group seeks to have a liaison in every single diocese of the country and to work with their bishops to get the message to parishes and to pastors. It's, as you know, in this political climate, it can be frightening to speak to these issues. When a pastor in a parish speaks to it, people will come up to him and say, bye. I'm not going to donate to this church anymore, things like that. And that's scary. So we're trying to get to the grassroots and trying to remind people that it's not a matter of confrontation. It's a matter of just elucidating the gospel. So many places in the gospel Jesus speaks to the dignity of the poor, the love that we need to have for our brothers and sisters who are sick and vulnerable and so on. It's really basic gospel stuff. And, a good preacher, of course, either makes it completely obvious how we should be living in this world today and applying those things, or expressing it in a way that brings that message home. The way that we're going to be effective ultimately is not by telling people what to believe. Not certainly, especially not in this age, but to sharing the story of the gospel and sharing the story of our vulnerable brothers and sisters. That's what's going to change it. And we're really working to help give pastors ways that they can do that, ways that they can, say, bring an immigrant family from their parish in and have a chance to meet them and talk with them and so on. Break down those boundaries, those borders, if you will, in our parish communities. as the example I gave from that country church, it's powerful. Just to have the chance to meet and talk with people, you don't have to say much more.
Okay, I'm just going to say Voldemort. President Trump. 8 years ago, at the border, he separated families, children from their mothers and dads. Young children probably remained with their mother. Had them in large, housing, which cots, put teenagers in vulnerable positions. And I'm just wondering what your text mets, bishops or the Catholic Church, plans, do you have a plan to try to make sure this doesn't happen again?
We Americans are slow learners, aren't we? We responded, I think, as a nation very strongly at the first time that families were separated. And it had the effect of getting the president to back down on those deliberate efforts to separate families. By the way, I don't know if you heard, but there's something like 400 kids that they could not reunite with their families still out there. But I'm just waiting and wondering what it's going to take for people to recognize the cruelty of the new policies that are being instituted and those that are being considered, apparently, at this moment. And, the church is trying to speak as strongly as we can about these issues as they come up. One of the, I think, tactical choices the administration has made is to just throw it all out there at once and make it very difficult for us to focus in on one thing or another, not only as a church, but as whatever group or individual. And so we're certainly trying to do what we can, and that's why I'm here today. There are a few people in El Paso saying, why is our bishop gone all the time? I think it's a time when I need to get out there, and that's what I'm trying to do. And there are many other bishops. If you look on the Justice for Immigrants website, by the way, you'll find statements of many of our bishops, including, I believe, Iowa, the Conference of Bishops in Iowa, and individual bishops in their particular dioceses who have come out with statements assuring their support and accompaniment and trying to bring to light the impact of many of these policy decisions. We'll continue to do that. Where's Aimee?
Bishop, I do not have a question for you.
From
but
where?
I have a heart filled with the gratitude and appreciation to the people of Iowa. I came to this state 25 years ago where my dignity was restored back because of the people like you who care. And I do not know if really you one day have got a chance from some individual like me to give back what you have given to the people like me, where I feel one of you as a member of the human community. So I would like to say thank you.
Yeah, if I might just comment very quickly, I meet so many immigrants that are just overwhelmed with gratitude for what they receive. They don't take it for granted. And they love despite all of the struggles, they love this country. You know, they love us. They make us so much better.
Bishop, my question is easy. Can you repeat the name of the organization you plugged during your talk that we could support?
Oh, I'd be happy to. No, it's a fund that was created in 2019, the first time the border was shut down by a Trump administration. And it's called the Border Refugee Assistance Fund, BRAF for short. We put it out on GoFundMe and in other places. And we had a wonderful response. It's enabled us to do a lot of work in Ciudad Juarez to help them respond to the needs there. It supports a medical clinic since then. There's a medical school in El Paso that is now sending physicians and nurses to the other side on a regular basis because there are many medical needs that people have after arriving there after their journey. We also support psychological services to people who were terribly traumatized by their journey. We're supporting shelters. Since that time in 2019, and we think in some measure, but because of our help, the number of shelters in Juarez has grown from a few to something like 20. And so we're very proud of that. If anyone wishes to make a donation, it can be made out to the Diocese of El Paso and a note in the memo that says Border Refugee Assistance Fund or BRAF, and we make sure it gets to the right place.
Very early, you said, it's not the people that are broken, it's the immigration system that's broken. What's been your experience as to the most effective ways to talk to our state and federal legislators to try to correct that? And I make my quick statement. I'm a retired Protestant minister, university professor, and activist, writer now.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. So one of the main things that you can do to influence your legislators is to talk to them. Okay? You know, you don't have to go saying, I'm gonna hit them over the head with what's right and so on. You know, be kind, be loving, and no matter where that person might stand on various issues, help them to know that you take this issue seriously. Legislators do always have their ear to the ground and their finger to the wind, you know, to see what their constituents are thinking. And so too often, frankly, we've been silent apparently, and other people have been speaking with a much louder voice than we have. You know, we need to do it, again, respectfully and well, but it's not simply the power of your argument, but the fact that you are speaking. Do you follow what I'm saying? The fact that you're in communication, you're advocating. So that can be as simple as just sending a little note by email or a letter or calling the office and leaving a message. If you can get kind of specific about particular legislation for or against and so on, better yet. That's basically, you know, a work that the Conference of Bishops is trying to do too. Most people don't know it, but, you know, we have an advocate arm for the Conference of Bishops that lists, you know, the way that gospel principles apply to particular legislation, and we try to express that at the national level as well, and it's the kind of thing I'll be doing this week.
We'll take one more question back there, then we've got a couple questions down here, and then we'll probably wrap up after that.
how can you help? How can the church help? What can you say to us immigrants so we can keep the hope and the faith if we know that the alternative is going back to our countries to be hungry or being persecuted? Or what can we do about it?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question. I really appreciate it. I think this is something that the church particularly needs to do, but all of us need to be involved in, no matter what our background. And that is what we can do is walk with our brother and sister immigrants. It's that simple. And we are doing our best to express our love and care for our immigrant community, and our willingness to be with you. You know, we don't have a lot of power as the world measures power, but we do have a lot of love. And we've come to love and cherish your presence in our midst. And when you hear so many in the world saying so many awful things about you because you're an immigrant, when you hear people making accusations and threatening, know that you're not alone. That's our hope, is that we can walk with you. And you know, I just want to say more broadly, this the fear in the immigrant community is palpable right now. Fear isn't really the right word. It's terror. Terror. Such terror for people living in our country, that they are being hunted down. That people who came to escape persecution, to escape life-threatening situations, are now being hunted and terrorized by the country they escaped to. They're left with no place to go. It's, for me, not an academic issue. I hope you can see that. I wish I had time to share more stories with you, but people I've come to know and love are just at wit's end. Their children are so scared. You know, I'm very close to a Venezuelan family, and the place where they live, they put up a security camera. Every time the 7-year-old sees a police car coming by, he loses it. He's so fearful. He was traumatized by the journey, and now this has all come back to him, and his family is actually saying, we can't live like this anymore. We're going to take the risk of going back to the place we left because the government, people in the government, were threatening us. But we'll take the chance that we can make it there because we can no longer live here. So it's serious, what we're facing right now.
Thank you so much for spending time with us. As you were talking, a thought came to my mind that I wonder about. I would ask you and include Bishop Joensen perhaps. And in asking the question, I don't in any way mean to diminish the role that I think each one of us have to decide what in the Sam Heck it is we can do. But you spoke of Vance. And there's a quote I saw from him recently. I find him disgusting, but I'm sorry, I just have to say that. His wife, who is a Hindu, said in 2019 that she thought his conversion to Catholicism was good for him. And he responded in 2020 in an essay he wrote for the Lamp Journal. He says, "It was the Catholic part of my heart and mind that demanded that I think on the things that actually mattered." The man has affiliated himself with someone who obviously has no moral compass. I wonder if, as bishops, do you know the bishop that he looks up to?
I know who that bishop is not.
Yeah, and I'll bet it's not the new Archbishop in D.C. either, if I understand the Pope's appointment there. I just wonder, we hear every day information that tells us we just have to think of ways that we can individually, as well as coming together as people, try to influence some of the horrible things in a better direction that are going on in our country. And I just thought, I wonder if I'm sure there are personal relationships with bishops, and you would know perhaps who Vance is affiliated with, or was. But as a group, I wonder if the bishops could come together and do some education of this vice president who has no idea what it means to be a Catholic and follow the gospel. Amen.
Well, I'm glad he became a Catholic. And I trust in the power of grace to work. I did offer, after that comment regarding our migrant refugee services efforts, that I think he's been badly informed, and that I'd love to sit down with him and talk to him about it. He hasn't taken me up on the invitation quite yet, but we hope that day will come.
Bishop, first of all, thank you for being here and bringing the information. So on a more local level, right now in the Iowa legislation, we have several bills that are anti-immigrant in their nature. One of them specifically, House Bill 187, that is requiring local law enforcement agencies to sign up with ICE, so making our local enforcement pretty much immigration agents. So the experience you've seen in Texas, where they have done this in several counties and many state organizations, what advice you have for us Iowans into why this is not a good idea, and also what we can do to prevent that law from happening?
Yeah, many local police organizations are very concerned about these kinds of measures. And there are a number of reasons that they're concerned. One of the main ones is that they know that for effective law enforcement to take place, that they need to have the trust of the community. And whenever a crime is committed, they need people that feel like they can report it without fear. And so there needs to be a separation there. There's a man here today, he happens to be a deacon, but he's also a person who had a career in law enforcement, Mark Presser. Where are you, Mark? And he's with the Immigration Forum. It's a secular organization to which I also belong that has brought together law enforcement groups from around the country in an effort to continue to bring that message to legislators. So I don't see, is Mark here? There you are. Yeah, so stand up, Mark. Thank you. One of the things we're really trying to do in El Paso, and we've been working on for years, is to have relationships with the different law enforcement organizations, sheriff, local police, and so on, as well as the federal agencies. We sit down and meet with them on a regular basis, and at least make sure that they're hearing these kinds of voices and considering them as they seek to be faithful to what they know is really good policing.
I think we're getting to the end of our time. So, Bishop Seitz, I have a personal favor to ask of you. My wife had a question, but I am duty-bound to stop this due to time. So would you mind talking to my wife after we're done here? Bishop Joensen, thank you for your wisdom in encouraging us and our committee to invite Bishop Seitz. It was a wise choice. Bishop Seitz, thank you for coming. There will be a reception immediately following, up the stairs to the Levitt room. So please feel free to join us for that. And just 1 second. Can you help me here?
I want to say thank you for providing interpreters here to help us understand today.
There was a thanks for providing interpreters. Thank you. Thank you for your time and attention today. Please feel free to join us upstairs for reception. Thank you.